Gotta do the don't go back, man. It's TSM, one sip at a time, breaking the chains that held me blind. I'm learning to live, finding my way, step by step. I'm breaking away with every pour. I'm claiming my life. It's TSM, I'm ready to thrive. Yeah, it's TSM.
Hello. Hey, Samara. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm so good. I love that intro. It just makes me so happy.
I know. It's such a beautiful song. I love it. The lyrics are really nice. Yeah, really speaks to the TSM journey.
Yes, it does. It does.
Well, welcome everybody to this live conversation where we are here just to chat about really life beyond alcohol use disorder and TSM, because Samara, a lot of what we do with the Q&As, it's like digging into the TSM journey and helping people through that. But I want to talk to you today about kind of life after extinction and life after alcohol use disorder, because as you and I both know, there's so much work that goes into healing even after we've reached extinction. So I just want to get into that a bit more today. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great. This is a made me a little I was a little nervous about this topic just because we really don't talk about this that much, And I think it can be really inspiring and motivating to envision like what your life may be like after you get through this like difficult thing, like this mountain that you climb, and
Yeah.
then you're on the other side, and it's like, what now?
And I don't know, you've probably heard these comments, but I see comments all the time from people are like saying something like, I don't even know who I'd be outside of my drinking, or what does life look like if I really am a moderate drinker? And I know you and I have talked a lot about like the identity change that comes along with this, because for so long, so many of us have identified as daily drinkers or wine lovers, or your friends see you as the person who's the life of the party. And you really have to adapt a different identity through this process. And I think there's a reason that some people can get stuck or plateaued on the method, because there's a lot of change internally and mentally and emotionally that comes along with this journey, and like letting go of alcohol as that favorite coping tool or BFF or thing we use to run to when life gets hard, or even when life is fun, to celebrate and wanting to just like get buzzed and escape. We really have to be okay with letting go of that, I think, as we reach extinction and beyond. Even if we are still drinking, part of the life after extinction is uh, drinking from a place of control. So we're not really drinking to get drunk anymore or turn off our brain necessarily. It more adds to the moment. So, do you want to speak to that a bit? I guess like my specific question I want to kick things off with you is like, what surprised you about extinction? Like, were there things that were unexpected? Like, you start this pill, at least this is what I just, oh, this pill's gonna help me drink less. Great. But as I started on it, it like opened up a can of worms in like the best way possible. Um, and I know you and I've talked about it kind of opening up a whole new world outside of the alcohol use disorder, which had us living in a box. So I want to kick things off with you just understanding, what was surprising to you for better or for worse when you reached extinction and you realize like, oh, there's like more work to be done or more things to consider?
Yeah, that's such a great question. What was surprising to me about extinction? I think what surprised me when I hit extinction was, and this was in May of 2021, um, I think it was that I didn't really know who I really was. You mentioned that, and so it was, now that I had like this monkey off my back and I could just relax and be like, okay, I'm done with all that AUD stuff. I have
Mhm.
full control over alcohol. I call the shots. I'm in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
Then, what do I like? What what are the things that bring me joy, true joy? What do I like to do? What do I not like to do? It was like this whole world, like you said, it opened up, and I was like, okay, well, what are the things that I really like in life, and
Yeah.
what are the things that I love? And so it was just this beautiful, I would say, discovery process of getting to know myself again from basically being a teenager, because I started drinking and doing other substances
Yeah.
at the age of 18. And that continued on for decades. So I really didn't know who I was from a teenager. So it was like I actually describe it as I was a teenager again, because I was finding out all these things that I like and don't like about life. And yeah, so
Did you feel like you were, because I feel like I was stunted in a way where I started drinking a lot at the age of 20, 21. And like you said, I didn't really have things I like to do outside of drinking. Sure, I would go on hikes or, go to movies or run a 5K, but it was always to get drunk at the end of the run, or I wanted to have beer there or alcohol there. So genuine like hobbies, things I like to do with my free time, I had no idea what I like to do. And I feel like my ability to cope without alcohol was something that was completely foreign to me. Like I remember the first time I felt, and this was still on my TSM journey, but the first time I felt genuine anger and wanted to reach for the drink, was about to take naltrexone and drink, but I was like, no. Again, back to that identity shift. I don't want to be somebody who automatically thinks I need a drink to kind of numb out from this situation. And for me, it was helpful to kind of think of people in my life that I'm like, well, when they're upset, they don't drink. So I know it's possible, but how do I bridge that gap and get there? Because for 10 years, my automatic reaction when things got hard was to reach for a drink. And even like the mentality of like, I deserve this, or I want to self sabotage, or just escape or numb out. And that didn't just happen because I was taking naltrexone. Like that took a lot of mindset work and emotional work and applying it consistently to kind of break that link between alcohol being my go-to. Um,
yeah.
so what was that process like for you? Like, was it challenging? Because, I've just to kind of like give an example of some members in our program who are almost at extinction. They say things like, oh, I feel like I deserved it. I had a really hard day and I just deserved that drink. Part of us, yes, we genuinely feel like that. But when you think about the long term of that, what you're telling yourself you deserve is actually harmful for you. So you talk a lot about mindset. I think we both do because that is so important. So like talk about the mindset you had to have to even get to that place of being willing to explore different things that brought you happiness or joy, or you used to cope and self-soothe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned something really prominent. It was that you had to think of yourself as becoming somebody, a, like a new version of yourself.
Yeah.
And that was something that started to get instilled in me in the TSM process. I just started to really think of myself as becoming a new version of myself. And so it was identity based. And I know that can get a little frou-frou and people might get kind of overwhelmed with thinking about identity. But I would really say that at the end of phase 2 and definitely phase 3, the identity piece was there. I was like, who do I want to be?
Mhm.
What kind of drinker do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be when it comes to coping? Just like you had to ask yourself, and it was just this process. It was gentle because it wasn't all happening at once. But it was a gradual change. And it took time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I had to give myself a lot of grace, during that time. But I do have to say that the coping part of things was the hardest
Yeah.
part. I think you agree with me on that. It was really a difficult thing to teach myself how to cope. I mean, I remember literally sitting with a blank sheet of paper, and I was like, what can I do instead of reaching for the drink when I'm having this emotional day, or I've had a really stressful week and I just want to unwind and I just want to just relax and shut everything off in my brain, and I literally had nothing. a blank sheet of paper, and I just decided I was going to write down some ideas. I was like, 1, go for a walk. 2, take a bath. And so these weren't active coping tools yet. They were just ideas in my head that
Yeah.
I put down on paper. And scientific evidence shows that when we write something down, 85%, we have an 85% chance of actually accomplishing it. So it was something that was interesting. So I wrote it down, and then I just started practicing these different tools, and it was little by little. But sure enough, eventually that became my go-to coping tool.
Yeah, and like you said, little by little, because something's coming up. One of our members said last night on the call, and I love doing the calls with our members because we learn so much as we observe people going through this journey. And what this person said was really interesting. They were talking about how they conceptually knew all of the things that they needed to do. Like you talked about, you were creating a list of the things that could potentially be coping tools for you or coping skills. They weren't yet, but potentially. And they were like, I don't want to do those things. Like, I just want to drink. I want to reach for the drink. I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want to take a bath or whatever the 1,001 things we could do. And I think that's a reality for people. And I don't think that's a bad thing if that's where somebody is. I think we're all there at some point where we're so attached to, I mean, I call it like, it was like my BFF, my frenemy. Alcohol, it really feels like this intimate relationship we have with this substance, as strange as that might sound to some people, but it really is our companion. We know exactly what it's going to do. It's going to make us feel good, comforted, turn off from the world. And that becomes a very strong association. And I see some of these comments in here too. Someone saying, people get uncomfortable when you reclaim your boundaries, which is really interesting because I think boundary setting is definitely a part of this process, even setting boundaries with ourselves and becoming more disciplined in that regard.
Yeah.
Someone else is talking about the habits. It's absolutely the habitual piece too. How would you say, in your experience, like what mindset did you have, or heart set, or emotional state that caused you to be willing enough to try the other coping skill? Going for that walk, for example. Drinking probably still sounded appealing. Like that's always the option on the table. It's the default choice. It's the easy, familiar choice. But you knew conceptually that in order to take on this new identity and be the person you wanted to be in the future, like we really have to practice being that person who we want to become. It sounds silly, but you're not that person yet. You have to practice becoming that person, and then you become that new person. How did you, like, what kind of mindset did you have that allowed you to be willing enough to try those different coping skills so that ultimately you were working toward, being somebody who would take a walk instead of drown your sorrows in a bottle of wine when you had a bad day? Talk about that a bit.
Yeah, great question. I mean, I think I really had to go through a grieving process, and I know that's a really tough word, grief. It sounds awful, but I literally had a breakup with a, a long-term boyfriend, alcohol,
Yeah.
and I was breaking up. And this was not just a one-day thing. This was like over the course of several months. This is what prepared me to have that mindset of even wanting to try a new coping tool. I needed to gently let go of that version of me, the one who reached for that drink every single time,
Yeah.
even when I was rewarding myself, celebrating any activity, any event, any emotional, difficult day, all of it. And so it was a letting go over time. It didn't happen in 1 week, you know.
Yeah.
And I think I allowed myself I sensed that I was having like this significant change or transition in life, transitioning away from alcohol as being the top priority
Yeah.
of my life. And so then I allowed myself to do it, which I think it can be an unknown.
Mhm.
So some people may resist that change.
100%.
because it's just so unknown. And so I just allowed myself to go into the unknown and just let it go. And then that's what got me ready to have that mindset shift where I was willing. That's the key word. I was willing to think of a different way of coping, to even think about what other way I could cope. And that just led to the next step of actually trying to cope in a different way. And then that created new neural pathways in the brain. And then, like little baby steps, you eventually, I remember the day where I actually had a decision. I was going to either eat ice cream or have wine. And I chose, I wholeheartedly chose the ice cream.
Mhm.
Like it was probably the very first time that I really, really just really wanted the ice cream and not the wine. And I
Wow.
was like, oh my God.
Had you practiced that type of thing leading up to that, to where, you had the ice cream or other coping tool multiple times, or what led up to you being in that place where you genuinely prefer the ice cream over wine?
Yeah, I practiced it, and it wasn't maybe such a genuine. It was more like, because in the Sinclair method, we do have to challenge ourselves.
Right.
So it was a little bit more of like, let me practice this coping tool first, and then I'll see if I want to drink afterwards,
Yeah.
But then this time it was like, no, I really, really want that ice cream. And it was like a light bulb moment for me,
Yeah.
because I realized that all the work that I had been putting in phase 3, I have to say this was the later time, not the early phase of the Sinclair method. But all that work I had been putting in was working. It was working.
Yeah. Yeah, and like you said, like, it really does start in the mind, like making the decision that you are willing to try other things. It's not saying, okay, you've got to do that today, but it's just about getting your mindset right so that you're starting to think differently, because our thoughts that we're having inform our beliefs, which inform our behaviors. So if we're constantly in that same thought loop of, wine is my BFF, wine is my coping tool when I'm stressed or sad, or I deserve this. If that's the only thoughts we're entertaining, it's going to continue to shape our beliefs and our actions. And we're just going to stay stuck in this hamster wheel, even on naltrexone. Like, we've worked with a lot of people. And again, this is okay to be in that place, but where they get plateaued, they're like using naltrexone religiously and correctly, but they're stuck in this hamster wheel of the habits. And sometimes I was chatting with a client recently who, they're doing everything right. They're tracking their drinks. They're being diligent about the protocol, eating a meal before they start drinking. But when we were talking, we were kind of digging into the fact that, and by the way, they're doing that, but they're kind of plateaued on the method. And we're trying to understand why that is. And we understood that underneath all of these correct behaviors he's trying to implement, there are these unhelpful beliefs that are operating, that are creating more resistance than needs to be there, for these behaviors to be effective. So, again, that belief of like, well, I'm a daily drinker. Like, who would I be without this routine? It's what I've done for years. Or, it makes me feel better, or it relaxes me in the evening. All of these kind of thoughts or beliefs that we can have that are almost on autopilot, even if we're doing everything correctly externally, we're logging our drinks, we're being diligent, we're going to be fighting the process if our mindset and our beliefs aren't lining up with, who we want to become in the future. And I think there's even neuroscience that talks about, when you visualize something, your brain doesn't know the difference between whether it's happening in reality or it's just a visualization. And so if we just start this process of getting free by imagining ourselves free, imagining ourselves as someone who copes with ice cream instead of wine, or doesn't drink most days, or whatever kind of someone's ideal relationship with alcohol is, when we can practice visualizing that first, it's going to help to influence the thoughts that we have, the beliefs that we have, and ultimately the actions that we have. I wonder what you have to say to that.
Oh yeah. I mean, the visualization, like, I mean, it kind of goes down to purpose,
Mm-hmm.
because I had this vision of who I could be without this AUD holding me back in my life. And it involved envisioning not only a better life, a healthier mental health, more energy, being clear-headed. But, I started seeing myself giving back. Like, I
Yeah.
started seeing myself like teaching people or coaching. I wasn't even a coach yet,
Yeah.
but I started to envision it. Like, I gave myself something to look forward to. Like, we didn't know each other.
Mhm.
And I reached out to you, and I had this vision in my heart that I wanted to be a success story one day,
Mhm.
that I wanted to be a TSM success story. So that was like a legit goal that I wanted to reach. So this is like about the vision that we can have for our future. It was about purpose because, like, you've heard me mention before, and you've said it, that our purpose was drinking for
Mhm.
all those years. That was my purpose. Well, now what would be my purpose? What was going to be my purpose? Like, I really wanted to help the person that I once was. That became my purpose. And I would envision it, and then that drove my values because, I don't want to wake up with a hangover, because then I'm not clear headed, and then I can't speak clearly. And then, so it kind of created a list of values, core values that I would start to live by, which were no more hangovers. Like, I want to be clear headed. I want to have energy so that I can uh, do things throughout the day and not be exhausted. And then that all aligned with the reduced drinking that I was doing. And then my beliefs and my mindset came after, I believe. I think
Yeah.
it led to that, because I really did have to become aware of my beliefs that I was believing about alcohol. And once they were me, and once I did that kind of inner journaling work,
Yeah.
when we journal, we get a lot of clarity. And I realized I had these set beliefs about alcohol, and became willing to change that belief. I
Yeah.
didn't want to believe that anymore. I
Right.
thought that was faulty
Mhm.
belief system. So I wanted to change that, and I really didn't know how to change a belief. This is all like my early stages of growth. But yeah, somehow through the journaling, I decided that it was an identity piece. I did not want to be a person who needed wine to unwind.
Mhm.
And just like you said, I wanted to. I saw other people's lives. They don't unwind with a bottle of wine every day. Like, they don't do that.
Yeah.
How can I learn how to unwind in a different way? It was that shift in mindset, in beliefs. Like, when I would ask myself open-ended questions, how can I become this person? What kind of person unwinds in a different way?
Yeah.
Sorry. I got something in my throat. I'm so passionate. Um, let's have some water. But yeah, like, it was just about like asking myself these open-ended questions that my brain would go into, like, looking for the answer.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I found that so to be true for my journey as well. When you and you said also that these beliefs were hidden, which, like, I think a lot of what we believe is hidden. It's on an unconscious level, and it's just beliefs that form over years and decades. So we may be believing something currently that we're not even aware that we're believing, that is driving our behaviors. And I know that might sound like woo woo or just like a word salad or something, but it really is this piece of the journey where, again, if we believe that, having that beer every night, that six pack every night, is something we really need or something we really love, or we can't imagine who we'd be without it, or it makes life better, or I just don't even know who I am without that. So I'm going to keep turning to that. If we have these unconscious beliefs operating, which I think all of us do, it keeps us stuck in those patterns. And to your point of asking these open-ended questions, that's where it starts, because it causes your brain to look for an answer, even if you don't have it yet. And, like I always ask myself, what would a normal drinker do in this situation? And that simple little question just helped me think objectively and get out of my habitual thought pattern and routine and look at the situation from like 1,000-foot view, as opposed to, that short-term thinking that we can get stuck in with alcohol use disorder. For me, I was always thinking about that next drink, kind of feeding that alcohol craving. Very hard for me to think long-term, like the purpose and the passion and the
Mm,
meaning that we can all have in life. And I believe that all of us have these, things that we've maybe pushed to the back of our mind that we want to do, that we've put off because alcohol has gotten in the way. One silly example for me is something inside me. I was like, I want to have a YouTube channel. That would be fun. Like, I have no idea why. I don't know what I'll talk about, but I always thought, oh, it would be fun to create content on YouTube. And my drinking prevented me from doing that, because it's hard to be articulate and clear-headed and think of what to say when you're drinking and hungover every day. But part of this process really is uncovering that and recognizing that AUD can keep you stuck in a box, in a prison that you're not even aware you're stuck in, because we're getting that immediate reward from the alcohol. It's feeding that instant gratification that we have, that we kind of learn to look for through years or decades of drinking, that quick hit from alcohol, the numbing effects from it. But through this process, I think for me and for a lot of us, we have to start to value that long-term thinking, that purpose. What lights me up in life? Where do I want to be in a year or two from now? What are things that I find deeply meaningful or just enjoyable or joyful outside of drinking? It doesn't have to be complicated at all, but it really is this process of, having that vision and working toward it brick by brick. I mean, it really takes consistency. It takes willingness to experience discomfort. I like what you said, that was the approach I used too, of just like, as I was learning new coping skills on TSM, I was like, okay, let me try this first. And then if I want to drink afterward, I will. But I was always diligent about trying something else, because I was so sick and tired of being this person that I had been for so long, and kind of, putting off the things that I really want to do. Um, I always reference this quote by Viktor Frankl, where he says something along the lines of, if our life doesn't have a deep sense of meaning, we will substitute it with pleasure. And I think that was so true for me. My life lacked meaning. Like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't really know. But my drinking, like you and I've talked about, that was my purpose. That was what gave my life meaning. It's what I looked forward to. It's what I did every day. And I really believe that because I didn't have meaning in my life, hobbies or things I was doing that were, really helping people or that I really enjoyed, it was so easy just to distract myself with pleasure, and really seeing that I was stuck in that short-term thinking. Okay, when's my next drink? Okay, I've got my next drink. Now where's the next drink after this? And then at work, okay, it's 11 o'clock. I can drink in 6 hours. Okay, like, just in that very, short-term thinking thought loop that was just keeping my AUD going.
Yeah, someone said in the comments, the vicious cycle. Oh my gosh, what a vicious cycle of drink, regret, guilt, shame, beating myself up, and then do it all over again
Yeah.
for years.
Yeah. Just for that temporary reward of the alcohol. And this is stuff you hear people talk about all of the time. But I think for those of us who have success with naltrexone and TSM, it's like, you can't get out of that vicious cycle, because you're just thinking about that craving in the next drink. And it just becomes more intense the longer you try to resist it. But with the gift of naltrexone, you hear a lot of people talk about it giving you that space to be able to focus on other things and, rebuild that life. Like, I use the analogy of naltrexone being the key to the prison door. The key unlocks the prison door, but you have to get up and walk outside the prison. You have to rebuild a life that won't put you back in the prison. One thing one of our members also said last night, they'd been doing the method a couple times. I think this was their third or fourth attempt at doing TSM. And they said they would respond, do really well, almost get to extinction, and then tell themselves, oh, I can drink without it again. And then go back to drinking without naltrexone, and then do that again. What would you say to that? I know. So like, how does someone get to that place where they're like nearing extinction, but then like something inside them reverts to that old familiar pattern of wanting to drink in the ways they have been? Like, what made your second attempt and successful attempt at TSM successful compared to the first? Like, yeah, what was that caused you to keep kind of moving forward and push through the resistance and the difficulty and going into these uncomfortable territories, doing things you weren't familiar with, teaching yourself other ways to cope? Like, yeah, how did you succeed the second time and get to where you are now?
Wow, I think, thinking about that question, I think I had to become that person. Like, I just wasn't
Yeah.
ready the first time around. I just was not ready. I used naltrexone as a magic pill. I wasn't ready to do the work. I wasn't ready to look inside. I wasn't ready to let go of alcohol as my favorite coping tool and my favorite thing to do. I just was not ready. And then a whole year had to go by where I actually saw the consequences of my drinking, like really in my face. And that's when I became ready. And then I do have to say, in my early phase of the Sinclair method, the second time when I was ready, I got really interested in personal development work.
Mhm.
So I would really like anything that I thought of, like even like, how do I have more confidence? I would Google it. I'd be like, how do I have more confidence? Like, how do I trust myself more?
Yep.
Google, how do I trust myself better? Like, how do I develop resilience? How do I like, I would find articles and videos, and I was actually pursuing this stuff.
Mhm.
I still do it to this day. Just the other day, I Googled something. What was it? Oh my gosh. I can't remember right now, but yeah, it became a habit that I Google these personal development type of, so something that came up during that time in the early phase of the Sinclair method, the second time around, so when I was ready, was this topic of self-compassion. And I realized that I was so awful to myself and I treated myself horrible, bashed myself, just the things that I would say to myself. So I went on a mission to change that and enter self-compassion and mindfulness. And so I started learning all these techniques about how to do that. And little by little, I really think that was a huge part of me changing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, was this, I was now offering myself so much compassion for my mistakes, for my setbacks, for just being inadequate, or when I felt I was inadequate. And I was just really kind to myself. And
Mm.
then I started becoming my biggest cheerleader, and I started encouraging myself. And, when I would have a setback, I'd say, that's okay. You're learning how to have a new habit. And people, when they're learning new habits, they fail and you just get back up again. So I had never in my life talked to myself that way. I mean, not even in as a child, or I mean, a teenager, I pretty much learned how to be my worst enemy,
Yeah.
and so now it was a total shift. And I think that initial, changing my attitude towards myself helped me grow into the new version of myself, the one that doesn't prioritize alcohol.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I love that you're mentioning prioritizing alcohol, because it's almost like I had it on a pedestal where like it was the top of the hierarchy in my life. No matter what I was doing, good day, bad day, on vacation, time off, like alcohol was my number one go-to. There were no other options on the table. And I really remember believing, I have this vivid memory of a Saturday before I started TSM, and I was like trying to white knuckle it and delay my drinking because I always wanted to drink starting early. And I was like, I'm going to wait till 2 o'clock today. And I like went out on a walk, and I remember seeing people like playing with their dog at the dog park. And I was like, so they probably want to drink right now, but they're just like being disciplined and they're not drinking because they know it's bad for themselves. I literally believe that everybody wanted to drink all the time like I did. Like I did not know that that was not a normal experience, and that that is a symptom of somebody who has an alcohol use disorder. When I first met my husband, He doesn't drink during the day. It's just something he doesn't do. And I remember thinking, like, I don't know if this relationship is going to work if he doesn't drink during the day, because it was such a huge part of my life. And I felt like he didn't mean it in like a bad way, but I felt kind of guilty because I was like, oh, you don't want to have a glass of wine with lunch? Like, oh. And he was like, I don't drink during the day. And it was just like this thinking about where my mindset was at and the things I believed compared to, how that changed post extinction. It's a night and day difference. And it really is like we are worshiping alcohol to some extent.
Yeah.
And understandably so, again, because it's blasting our brain with all these feel good hormones. But that's where naltrexone comes in to dampen that and help the brain stop seeing alcohol as that primary reward over time. But sometimes, something that's coming up for me as we're talking about this is we see some people, like I think of people sometimes in their retirement era where they work their whole life, now they're retired, they're drinking a lot more. They don't really have super huge passions or things that light them up or that they love to do. Maybe alcohol is still one of like the top choices for them. What would you say, speaking to those people, like, understanding that mindset that they might be in, that alcohol is still this like amazing thing that they want to turn to? Like, how does that type of person get to a place where they're no longer prioritizing alcohol? They see other things in life as meaningful and fulfilling, as they navigate this like new phase of life where they have all this time on their hands and, maybe don't have a ton of passions or hobbies that they love to do.
Wow, yeah, I run into that a lot. I think I have this whole opinion, I guess, or thought about retirement, and like, retirement is great if you can do that and you retire, but I don't think we ever fully retire. Like, we can reinvent ourselves at every age, and I truly believe that we are designed as humans to have something meaningful that we're pursuing, to pursue something in life that is bigger than ourselves, that is something that lights us up, that makes us come alive. When we don't do that, we are susceptible to substances and addictions, and like you said, with the pleasure, the distractions. So yeah, I would say that there's something to be said for, that's what I was doing after extinction. I was like, well, what lights me up? What do I love? What do I don't like? What commitments do not want to go back to, like, so it was this whole discovery, and it really, I mean, just the amount of growth that I have done since TSM and extinction blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of healing and personal development and personal growth that I've had. I had no idea that I was going to overcome past trauma
Yeah.
after extinction. And I would go through a whole journey of a couple years of healing that trauma.
Yeah.
I had no idea that that was going to happen. But yeah, back to the retiree, it just, what lights you up? What can you find that most of the time, I'll give you a hint. Most of the time, it's going to be something that involves helping somebody else.
Yeah. I just got chills when you said that because I think it's so true. And our friend Dr. How he always talks about how you produce all these healthy endorphins and oxytocin and things when you serve others. And so we have a member I know who like goes to a soup kitchen, or even just being, like you being a coach or being plugged into the TSM world or volunteering at your church or whatever it is. I really do believe, or your grandkids getting more involved in their life, so many different things, but I really do believe giving back to others, it heals something inside of you. And I think that's something that's good about the AA program, where sponsees and sponsors, like, that helps them stay better when they're helping someone else stay on track. I know for me, I can't tell you what my TSM journey would have been like had I not put my face out there and started making videos and talking to people and helping people. Like, I had no purpose before this method. Like, I'm not joking. When I would like work jobs that I could show up and be hungover and like, not have a bunch of pressure on me, my life was just very like, I was functioning and I was getting by. And I would look at people who had like hobbies that they loved and pursued and were good at. And I'm just like, I have nothing. And that was honestly a hard place to be. I
Wow.
had some like just bad feelings about that. I felt bad about myself because I didn't have those things. But I love that you said it's just never too late to start in life. In fact, I follow a couple of YouTubers. They're ladies in their 60s and they're like just getting started. And I love their content. And so that's just like one example talking about reinventing yourself or
Yeah.
pursuing a new passion. It's never, ever too late to do that. And I really believe that our AUD keeps us stuck in this negative thought loop where we see ourselves as this big and we like you were talking about, we're so hard on ourselves, we're mean to ourselves, we think we're not worthy. um I know you were talking about like that self-compassion, which again, that might sound kind of woo-woo and like, yeah, whatever, something you can kind of dismiss. But truly, if you're mean to yourself and hard on yourself, it stresses out your nervous system. And that is going to make you want to drink to kind of calm the nervous system
Yeah.
temporarily. So there really is this something to this, I believe, like, and we're huge on that in our program, just being super self-compassionate, giving yourself grace, yes, pushing yourself, but not holding yourself to a standard of perfection, and realizing that mistakes are the most memorable and valuable learning experiences. It's not about, being perfect or being, hard on yourself because you drank too much, you're not progressing fast enough. It's giving yourself grace through this process. It's so important to this journey.
So, so good.
Yeah, I see Jennifer has a question in here about let's see. Have you heard anyone using Ozempic with naltrexone? My doctor just recommended it. I feel a difference in terms of binging, which is the issue now. I can go 5 days alcohol free, but still when I drink too much. I've heard from a couple of our members who are using Ozempic with naltrexone. One lady, when she got her Ozempic dose to a high enough dose, she said it helped her a lot with, she'd been on naltrexone for a while and now Ozempic was like the missing piece.
Wow.
Um, that's the extent of my knowledge. Dr. Volpicelli in our monthly Q&As, he's talked about it a bit as well. There is research to show that it can help with alcohol cravings. But that's what I know about it. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Samara.
I really don't know much about it. I don't know. I've heard a little bit. Something negative that I heard is that it can kill your dopamine, like
Mm.
while you're on it. So what is that, like two things that are blocking now? Like, so I don't know. It's just so new to me. I'm really curious though to learn
Yeah.
more.
I feel that way. Like with naltrexone, what I love about it is that it's like an old school medication. We know, the long-term use and the side effects and things like that. Whereas like with Ozempic, it's so new. Yeah, for me personally, I would be like hesitant to go on a new medication, but that's me personally. Yeah, some
Yeah,
people are
I
seeing help.
heard that it kills while they're on it, but I guess how long are you on Ozempic for? I don't know. But it just kills like a lot of dopamine, so they're like not like experiencing the happy chemicals. That's
Hmm.
what I heard. I don't know if anyone can talk about it in the comments. Maybe who knows better.
Yeah.
But what I liked about naltrexone is, and the Sinclair method is that I can. It's called pharmacological enhanced learning, right? So
There we go.
yeah, so you can actually train yourself to hate, well, not hate, but unlearn a habit that you do not want, that you do not like, and then you can train yourself to learn a habit that's really good for you, like exercise and going on walks in nature and all these other like wonderful endorphin boosting activities. So that's the difference for me. I loved naltrexone because of that. I could, target the drinking activity and then have my neural pathways unblocked, or not my receptors, sorry, my receptors unblocked on other days, and I could just enjoy life. And it really offset
Yeah.
it really helped me prioritize living again, right? Like it really did. Like it was phenomenal. It was so amazing that I'm thinking about doing another experiment where, because I don't drink anymore, really barely ever. So it wouldn't be for alcohol. Maybe what I would unlearn like white bread or something.
What do you have against white bread? No, I'm just kidding. No, I know you're very knowledgeable about health and wellness things and how food impacts our well-being. I would be curious.
I don't know. It's just an idea. And then I
Yeah.
would get that boost of endorphins on days when they're unblocked, because you're getting a heightened amount of endorphins, which is more than normal. So I don't know. I'm just curious to see if I could experiment more with that.
Let's talk about that real quick for people who may not be aware, because that really is key to success with TSM, the pharmacological enhanced learning. It's talked about in the book, The Cure for Alcoholism. But essentially, that is why alcohol-free days, and particularly multiple days in a row, the more you advance on TSM, not from the beginning necessarily, but when you take naltrexone and you're targeting blocking that endorphin from alcohol, and then on the days you don't have naltrexone in your system, 24 to 48 hours after, your receptors are unblocked and they're ripe for learning new behaviors. And that is how you teach your brain that there are pleasures outside of life other than alcohol. It's not necessarily like you feel like an ecstatic high from it, but you could. But for me, it was just really trusting that, okay, the next 48 hours, my receptors are unblocked. They're super sensitive. And if I go out and bike ride or watch a movie or eat ice cream or get a massage, that reward is going to be extra reinforcing because my receptors are freshly unblocked. And so this is where, as we get toward extinction, those alcohol-free days and really being intentional with seeking out these other pleasures are really, I believe it's fundamental to healing. Like if you're spending your AF days just being bored at home or working or not pursuing something very special for yourself, a treat, a reward. Even some days when I was like working and busy, I would just like watch funny videos on YouTube to cause myself to like laugh and like feel, that good feeling. I really believe that that's vital to success. Where I see people get stuck on TSM is when they're not having alcohol-free days and they're doing the extinction part, which is necessary, but their brain isn't learning anything new. And just like we learned alcohol use disorder and learned to turn to alcohol, we have to intentionally teach our brain other things through repetition. But the really good news is your brain likes to learn. So if you keep feeding it new activities, new coping skills, and you do it consistently, your brain will learn. And that's where people get to, like you said, you had the option, should I drink tonight or should I have ice cream? I genuinely want the ice cream because I have enough experience on alcohol-free days, exploring other pleasures, and alcohol is just an option. It doesn't really sound appealing right now. And that's the real place of freedom, right? Where, like, I think most people that go on TSM, they want to have that indifference to alcohol. They want to have that genuine freedom where they can take it or leave it. And how do we get to the place that like you and I are in, or lots of other people that reach extinction? It's through repetition of practicing different things and having a menu of options of things that bring us pleasure. Like someone said, filling the void. I mean, that's basically what it is. When we take alcohol out of our life or reduce it a lot, there's this massive hole that's left with all the time we spent thinking about it, consuming it, recovering from it. And if we're not filling the void, we're just going to stay stuck. And I think that's like a really simple way to put like all of these changes you and I are talking about.
Yeah, so good. I mean, I remember while you were talking, I was really intentional about the PEL, pharmacological enhanced learning. I was really intentional. I would target specific activities that I would do exactly 48 hours after I knew that my receptors were not blocked anymore. And I remember going to spin class and then on the way home, and in spin class, I would give it all I got. I mean, like I would just go for it, like push myself. And that produced so many endorphins that on my way home, I would literally be jamming in the car, full music, like just full blast, just like dancing and singing. And then when I got home, I would have a dance party by myself in my room to music really loud. And this was different. Like I don't remember doing that maybe when I was like 15 years old.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that was new and different. I hadn't done that kind of thing in decades, and it was this. I know that it was this. I was maximizing the results of
Mhm.
this method by being really intentional about that enhanced learning that we get. And I think it's a very under talked about and underrated, I think,
Mhm.
part of the Sinclair method, but it is like the basis of the Sinclair
Yeah.
method. It's the foundation of it, of why it exists. And
Yeah.
we don't hear a lot about it, right? But it made so much of a difference, and me becoming that new version, right? Me becoming that new person, that new identity, that person who really wanted to fully let go of alcohol, like for real,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and, like, when people get stuck in that place of just, like, they're close to extinction, but they're not quite there, they're still over drinking sometimes or, drinking more than they planned. I really do believe it comes back to that, like, there needs to be more practice on alcohol-free days, seeking out those pleasurable things, and it doesn't have to be complicated. When you were talking, it reminded me because I live in an apartment, I can't, like, blast loud music, but I would put headphones in, and I would, like, dance in my living room as another simple way to, like, be at home and get these healthy endorphins.
I
Being
love it.
consistent with it, like, that is just so crucial. Because again, if you're just drinking on naltrexone, that's what's a lot oftentimes what's talked about with the Sinclair method, take
Yeah.
naltrexone an hour before drinking. That's half of it, right?
That's half of it. There's the whole other half, which is like we forget to talk about it. And it's like, oh my gosh, it's made such a difference. And
Yeah.
I know that that can make such a difference in someone who's plateaued. I
Mhm.
know it. If they just were really intentional about it. And you have to like kind of dive into the science to understand it, you know? So I had to consistently ground myself in the science and like reintroduce it, like relearn and reopen the book again and read some pages, like,
Yeah.
reference the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, literally, we have to hear something 7 times, so they say in, like, the, I don't know, marketing world or whatever, for it to stick, and so just because like, you learn something once in the Sinclair method, reminding yourself of it because it's so easy to forget, like, our brain, for whatever reason, just forgets certain things, so I love that you mentioned diving in again and again. And I think that's so cool about this method that we can ground ourselves into the science of it, even if our journey is plateaued or not going as we expected, reminding ourselves that this works for most people. This is why it works. This is how it works. And being consistent about, yeah, it really, it so is about the consistency. Like even just little things someone does each day. I also read this other book called The Slight Edge, which was so good. I read it after TSM, but I was like, man, this would have really helped in my TSM journey because it really is about valuing the tiny decisions we do each day. And those tiny decisions, they're very easy to do, but they're also easy not to do because they make no
Mhm.
significant difference in the moment. So a lot of people, they'll know, oh, I need to like have an alcohol-free day and get endorphins. Yeah, I'll wait till tomorrow or whatever. Or, just these little decisions that can really make or break our journey in the long run. And so having that mindset again of like these little things, even though it's not making a significant difference today, if I do that little thing over months, it's going to make the difference. It really, really is.
That's so good. I want to read that book.
It's good. Yeah. It's an older book. I don't even think it's on Audible, but it was
Oh,
yeah, it's kind of on habit change and behavior change, but the way he presents it is just it clicked. It really made
mhm.
a lot of sense. It changed things in my life, like with just being more consistent with things. It gave me a mindset to value the really small decisions that I make, like even like, oh, I can do the dishes tonight or I can do them in the morning. It's like, well, if I take 5 minutes and do them tonight, it's going to help me tomorrow. It's just these little mindset tricks, I guess you could say.
Interesting.
Okay, well, we have to wrap up this call. It's almost been an hour. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I hope it was helpful to everyone who joined us live. Thank you, everyone who joined on the various platforms. Thank you for your comments. Perhaps we'll be back again to chat about this. Samara and I, we love helping people through TSM, kind of the nitty gritty of the journey, if you will, but there's also so much beyond TSM and life after extinction and really getting to that place that so many of us want to be, this real indifference to alcohol, and it's kind of a mystery sometimes, like how do you get there, and it's not just a quick answer. It's not just about taking naltrexone. There's so much to it. So thanks so much for everyone who joined. Any final words from you, Samara?
Well, yeah, I think that what you just said reminded me of seeing your comments in, not your comments, but people's comments on your TikTok, and seeing that people, they often think that we're promoting this medication and it's a magic pill. And if they would just look a little bit deeper, it's so much more than, it's not a magic pill, right? It's just so much more than taking a pill. It really is just the first step, is taking the pill. And it is a beautiful tool that we can use. But the ultimate thing is that we become this other version of ourselves, this new version of ourselves, and what's that process look like? And in that process, we learn how to love ourselves better. We learn how to be kind to ourselves. We learn how to handle trauma, like how to deal with trauma and how to become more emotional regulated. What am I trying to say?
Emotionally regulated.
Emotionally regulated. We learn how to be more resilient, and we learn how to stop instant gratification and like reach for bigger goals and have vision for our lives. And yeah, so it's such a beautiful healing journey. I say that all the time. And yeah, so it's not about a magic pill.
Yeah, that's like the again, that's the starting point. Like without naltrexone, we wouldn't be where we are because it undoes the learning in the brain, but we really have to, as we talk about, meet the medicine halfway and help it work and rebuild that life outside of drinking, because naltrexone's going to give us the space and mental clarity to start thinking about other things, but it's not going to force us to create a new habit or find a purpose in life or other passions and things like that. That's really where you come in, and naltrexone helps you to do that. I just want to say too, I love that you mentioned the trauma piece, because Gabrielle, who leads workshops for us on trauma, she talks about like big T, little t traumas. And I was kind of always like, not sure how I felt about trauma and things like that. But I really do believe that we all have different forms of trauma in our life, big T, little t. And you and I have talked a bit about the nervous system and how it can impact our nervous system and cause us to do things like drink too much or other self-sabotaging type behaviors. And what's so fascinating, you mentioned learning or healing through trauma even after extinction, and same for me. And it's fascinating that through this process, it's not like we have to uproot all our trauma and get to that until we can repair our relationship with alcohol. That can actually be done first, and there's still so much healing that can come after that.
Yeah, I'm really quick on with that subject. I realize now in hindsight that I had to address my AUD before even addressing like the big T trauma. So yeah, it definitely was the stepping stone to addressing and healing from big trauma in my life. And I wouldn't have probably been able to really process that stuff until I addressed the AUD and that monkey was off my back. And then I could fully be clear to be able to. So
yeah. It's just, it kind of, because some people out there will say, oh, you have to heal trauma in order to heal addiction. And I think maybe that's true for some people, but I just don't think it's a universal thing, like you can heal the addiction first and then heal trauma.
That's what I did. And I think that's what you did.
Same. Yeah. Same. And I just wrap up this comment: life beyond extinction, life begins. It's so true. It's like, it's just the beginning. Extinction is just the beginning.
Oh my gosh.
Really is.
So true. Couldn't have said it better. Yep.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. Really loved having you all here while we discuss this.